Hello everyone. Today's story will keep you hooked until the very end. Can love truly overcome betrayal and cruel schemes? Let's follow along to uncover this thrilling tale. John is arrested, and in the interrogation room, he is forced to confess the entire ruthless plot of kidnapping Diep to pressure James into handing over control of the company. But can his regret undo the crimes he's committed? The story centers around Diep, who was kidnapped by John, a close friend of James, in an attempt to force James to hand over control of the company. After being arrested and interrogated, John admits to the entire plot he carried out under the influence of his father. His confession not only reveals the cruel scheme but also the deep betrayal of his once close friend, James. Despite feeling regret, the damage has been done, and nothing can change the past. Diep and James now must face their wounds and rebuild their lives. However, they refuse to let the past haunt them and choose to live strong, building a happy future together, overcoming all difficulties. If you enjoyed this story and want to follow more exciting twists and turns, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. The interrogation room was cold and silent, with only the faint yellow light casting a dim glow over the figures seated at the table. John, once James's closest friend, now sat with his head hung low, his hands trembling on the table. His once confident demeanor had long since disappeared. In this heavy silence, he knew there was no escaping the truth that had bound him for so long. Finally, as the investigators began asking sharp, pointed questions, he lowered his head and began to recount his entire cruel plan. "Diep, she was just a pawn," John said, his voice hoarse, as if each word came from the depths of a dark pit. "I never intended to harm her. But I needed pressure to force James into complying with me." His words struck like a violent blow to everyone present, including the investigators who were struggling to maintain their composure. John continued, detailing the plan he had carefully devised. "It all started when I realized that James had slowly become a greedy man, obsessed with power and money. My entire family, especially my father, wanted to take back control of the company from James. But I knew that I couldn't persuade him on my own. I had to do something more drastic, something that would force James to submit." John paused briefly, his eyes lifting to meet the investigators, as if measuring their reactions. But no one spoke. The room remained heavy with tension, the ticking of the clock the only sound reminding them that time was passing. "So, I kidnapped Diep," John continued, his tone growing colder. "I knew James loved her. I thought that if I held her hostage, James would have no choice but to meet my demands. If he handed over control of the company to my family, I would release her. Everything would end without anyone getting hurt." Each word John uttered felt like a knife stabbing deeper into the hearts of those present. A once dear friend, a man whom James had trusted with his life, was now confessing to committing such a cruel act. Diep, an innocent woman, became a mere pawn in a power game orchestrated by someone she had never suspected. John's confession seemed to have no remorse. There was no sign of regret, only a cold, calculated sense of justification. The room was filled with a strange silence, as the investigators came to understand the depth of John's betrayal. His actions were not just about personal gain, they were driven by the influence and pressure from his own family. "Then what about your father?" one of the investigators spoke up, breaking the tense silence. "Was he involved in this kidnapping?" John sighed deeply, his eyes narrowing as if trying to find the right words. Finally, he admitted, "My father, he pushed me. He said if I did this, we'd get everything back. But now I see, it was all just a power play from him. I don't want to be part of it anymore. I was wrong." John's confession shook the entire investigation team. A man who had once been James's closest friend had now become a betrayer, all because of the destructive forces of greed and power. What he shared was more than just an admission of guilt, it was the revelation of how deeply manipulation and control could corrupt a person's soul. As John finally confessed, the room fell into an eerie quiet. Stories of betrayal, greed, and cruelty had been exposed. And now, the greatest question lingered in the air. Could James ever forgive a friend who had once been like a brother, or had everything already been destroyed beyond repair? John sat silently in the interrogation room, the cold, sterile environment only accentuating the weariness on his face. He was no longer the confident, self-assured man he once was. Now, he was consumed by regret. The weight of his guilt made it impossible for him to meet the eyes of the investigators. Each word he spoke felt like an unbearable burden, and he could sense the truth creeping up on him, tightening around his chest. After a long pause, John finally spoke. His voice was hoarse, weak. "Everything. It's all my fault. But I couldn't take the pressure from my father anymore. He was the one who pushed me to do everything, from kidnapping Diep to making ruthless decisions to seize control of the company." He paused for a moment, trying to steady his breath. I didn't know how to stop once it all started. I was blinded by it. And now, I realize I was wrong. Everything I did was a mistake. There was a heavy silence in the room as the investigators listened attentively, but no one spoke. They could sense the sincerity in John's words, but they also understood that no amount of confession could undo the harm that had been done. John continued, recounting the details of his involvement, from the secret conversations with his father to the steps he took to carry out the ruthless plan. "My father always said that our family had to take back control of the company, that if we didn't, we'd lose everything. He forced me to get involved in this scheme. At first, I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I see. I was wrong," John said, his voice growing softer. "I manipulated James, my best friend, and turned Diep into a pawn in this power game. I made them both suffer, and I can never forgive myself for that. The investigators continued to quietly take notes, but no one spoke. They understood that while John's confession was heartfelt, it was also too late. His actions could not be undone, and the consequences were irreversible. John felt the weight of his past mistakes bearing down on him, and he couldn't face the investigators. His guilt was palpable. One of the investigators, maintaining a stern expression, finally spoke up. "If you recognized how wrong it was, why did you keep going? Why didn't you stop after realizing the consequences?" John lifted his head, and for the first time, there was a glimmer of regret in his eyes. I couldn't stop. I thought I had to do everything to protect my family. My father always told me that I was the only one who could save the family business. But now I see, he just used me. I got dragged into something I couldn't control. He paused, clenching his fists, his eyes wandering. Diep. I never meant to hurt her. But I put her in this situation because of my own misguided ambitions. And James. I don't know if he'll ever forgive me, but I'll live with this regret for the rest of my life. The investigators remained silent, processing his words. It was clear that John had been manipulated by his father, but that didn't absolve him of the consequences of his actions. Still, there were many questions left unanswered. One of the biggest was James. Was he truly innocent, or was he also unknowingly drawn into this power struggle? The next step was to call James and Diep in for further questioning. They weren't suspects, but they were crucial witnesses in this case. However, no matter their involvement, their lives had already been deeply affected by John and his family's schemes. John couldn't help but feel anxious thinking about their involvement in the investigation. Though he had confessed, he knew the truth about what had happened was still far from clear. Would James remain entirely innocent, or had he been unknowingly entangled in a ruthless game of power? The journey to uncover the full truth was only just beginning, and no one could predict what would come next. But John knew one thing for sure: no matter what happened, he would never escape the haunting weight of the things he had done. After all the pain and loss, Diep and James finally found the peace they truly deserved. But peace was not easily attained, especially when the past still lingered, the ghosts of betrayal and schemes haunting them, and the pain still fresh in their hearts. However, with their love and resilience, they overcame the challenges and found happiness and tranquility once again. Although everything was behind them, the tense days in the interrogation room, the confrontations with the truth, left their marks. Diep, after everything she had endured, gradually realized that the only way to move forward was to live honestly with herself, not allowing the past to haunt her. Every day, she learned to forgive, not only those who had wronged her but also herself, in order to continue walking the path ahead. James, once a man full of anger and unease, had also found inner peace. Though he could never erase the pain caused by John's actions, he understood that life was not just about darkness. He learned to see things from a new perspective, stronger and no longer letting the past influence the future. He realized that his life couldn't be about vengeance or regret. Instead, he needed to focus on the good things and rebuild his relationship with Diep, the one who had stood by him through it all. Together, they began again, starting fresh, building a new life, one no longer shadowed by conspiracies and betrayal. Diep and James were no longer bound by the schemes and manipulations of others. Instead, they found strength in their love and mutual trust. The peaceful days returned as they faced the challenges of life together, no longer needing to worry about the dark past that once overshadowed them. Diep no longer feared the long, dark nights where she had once been trapped in pure terror. She regained her freedom, and that was the most important thing. Every morning when she woke up and saw James by her side, that was all she needed. They didn't need many words, just being together was everything. Love was enough to fill the empty spaces in their lives. For James, life had returned to simple yet sincere values. He no longer sought power or personal gratification as he once did. All he wanted was to cherish the most valuable things in his life, and that was Diep. He understood that life wouldn't always be easy, but as long as they had each other, they could overcome any hardship. Though they had experienced pains that could never be forgotten, they both knew that what had happened was part of the journey they had to go through. They couldn't change the past, but they could choose how to live so that the future wouldn't be affected. Diep and James nurtured their love together, knowing that only sincerity and trust would help them move forward. Day by day, they walked this new path together, no longer fearing or worrying about the dangers of the past. Their relationship had been rebuilt from the wounds, and they both felt that true love was something enduring, able to overcome anything. Peaceful evenings, mornings filled with light together, they shared simple moments of happiness. They knew that, no matter what, this love would be the only thing that would help them face any challenge in the future. In the end, although the shadows of the past still lingered, Diep and James had learned how not to let them control their lives. They had rebuilt their lives, a life full of hope and trust. And most importantly, they had learned that only true love could help them stay strong, not only in the beautiful moments but also in the toughest times. Now, their steps were no longer filled with doubt or fear, but with confidence, ready to face any challenge ahead. They knew that as long as they were together, they would always find a way forward. The story of Diep, James, and John deeply resonates with me, highlighting themes of betrayal, regret, and the power of love. The ruthless schemes and manipulation from John's family caused immense pain to innocent people. John, once a close friend, became a betrayer solely due to his family's ambitions. However, his late regret could not undo the harm that Diep and James had to endure. What impressed me the most was how Diep and James faced their past. They didn't let the pain and loss dominate their lives. Instead of living in hatred and resentment, they chose to heal their wounds and move forward together. It was their love and trust in each other that allowed them to overcome any challenges, no matter how difficult. This story makes me believe that, no matter how cruel life may be, if we have love and resilience, we can still rise and find light after the darkness.